Today we're going to finish up Joseph, and we're going to be in Genesis chapter 50 today, the last chapter of Genesis, and we're going to look at the end of the story. Now we've seen Joseph go through a lot of valleys and a lot of mountains throughout the course of his life, and yet through all of that, he's kept his eye on the prize. And he's watched the Lord, and he's trusted the Lord to do what only God can do, even in the midst of the valleys. He completely trusted God. We're going to start with Isaiah 46, 9 through 11. We're going to start there. Sorry, I don't think I put that on top. It should be second. Oh, yeah. Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. Verse 10, I make known the end from the beginning. From ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. From the east I summon a bird of prey, from the far-off land a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said, that I will bring about. What I have planned, that I will do. And so God, we see Joseph looking back across all of his life in chapter 50 and seeing God's providence through all the good times and through all the heartache. God was in control. And so that's what we're going to look at today as we look at this. He completely trusted God's purpose in his life. Now we're going to go to Genesis 50. And remember, even from a youth, he had things he could have been offended at. Things that he could have held on to. Unforgivenesses he could have held on to, and yet he didn't. And we talked last week on unforgiveness. But we're going to start in verse 15 of chapter 50. His father has just died. Jacob has just died. They've carried his bones back to their homeland. And now his brothers are worried. He's been good to him so far because Dad was still alive. And he's worried, they are worried that he didn't really forgive them. That he's just been biding his time until revenge is meted out. And so they come to his presence and they're worried. And we see in verse 15, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs that we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died, which wasn't really true. They're back to their own old tricks. Verse 17, this is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. And when their message came to him, Joseph wept. Let's pause there just for a minute. Was he weeping that they still didn't believe he'd forgiven them? Was he weeping that they still felt the need to lie? At whatever the purpose, whatever the reason, he wept. He was so moved by what the response was from his brothers. He wept. Then verse 18, his brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what's now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and for your children. And he reasoned with them and spoke kindly to them. He reassured them and spoke kindly to them. I couldn't find my glasses, sorry about that. He reassured them and spoke kindly to them. The opposite of what he could have done. The opposite of what he could have done. He didn't play his victim card. He didn't say, you know what? I have been a victim my whole life. I was mistreated by my family. My family treated me terribly. They did awful things to me. And then I'm falsely accused, and here I am. He didn't play the victim card. Boy, it's easy to play the victim card, isn't it? He also didn't hold on to resentment. He trusted God's providence in his life. Now, Luke 17:1. I've got a ton of verses, so Diane, bless her heart today. Susan's glad it's Diane today, I'm sure. Luke 17:1. It's impossible, this isn't that verse, it's impossible to live our lives without being hurt. Do you agree with that? How many of you have ever been hurt by somebody in your life? Everybody, right? Everybody has been hurt. It's impossible to live your life without being hurt. Let's look at 17:1. Then he said to the disciples, "It is impossible that no offenses should come, but woe to him through whom they do come. God is our avenger. He is the one who judges and justifies. We don't have to right the wrongs." It's impossible to live your life without offense. And yet there are people that are easily offended. Do you know that? There are people that you have to walk with eggshells around. You have to watch everything you say because you know they're going to take offense. Does anybody know that that's true? I don't want to be like that. I want to be someone that when someone does something that is wrong, that they can say, "I'm really sorry," and they know I'm going to say, "It's already forgiven." I want to be like that. I don't want to be easily offended. I don't want people to have to walk on eggshells around me. I want us to all examine, am I someone that is easily offended, that takes easy, we may not recognize it in ourselves. And you know what? I didn't even think of this topic till just now. This is the Lord. This wasn't even on my agenda for today, the easily offended part. And so that's from the Lord. Are you somebody that when someone does you wrong, man, you're wrong, you're mad about it, and you're going to let them know it? God doesn't want us to be easily offended. He wants us to be like Joseph and let it go. That song, let it go, let it go. What is it, Maggie? I'm sure she's going to tell me how bad this was when I get home. What? Yeah, what's the rest of it? Can't hold it back anymore. Oh, well, anyway. It doesn't work farther than that. All right, so let it go. It doesn't matter. We don't have to hold on to offenses, even against ourselves. Forgive. Forgive yourself. Forgive. Let it go. All right. Now, offenses are going to come. And then this is kind of an offshoot of this that the Lord has led me to this week. Joseph suffered all through his life. For 13 years, nothing but suffering. For 13 years. Why is there suffering? How many of you have ever wondered about that? Why is there suffering? Why does God allow? How many of you ever questioned something that happened? Why would God allow that? I had someone last night at the wedding, we were at a wedding last night, say, I just don't understand how God could allow that to happen, that situation. Why does God allow that to happen? And so I started thinking, there's a lot here. I have some stats. I have some statistics here. We all agree there's suffering. We all agree there's sin. Do we agree? Okay. In Italy in August, there was an earthquake. You guys probably heard about it on the news. 247 people died. In 2015, in the United States, the American Cancer Society estimated that 589,430 people died of cancer in the United States in 2015. According to the American Heart Association, 2,150 people die every day from heart attacks and strokes. That's a lot every day. The Centers for Disease Control estimates that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before age 18. Does that stagger you? 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before they turn 18. That staggers me. That shakes me to think about that. And then on a social media post that I found this week, it's a CNN clip. It shows a video of a teenage boy enticing a toddler to smoke marijuana as he's strapped in his car seat. 3 years old. Gets him to smoke marijuana. There's sin. There's suffering. It's not fair. And so when we look at that, we can be sad, and we can sometimes be disgusted by what we see. And we can wonder, where is God in all this? Where is God? How could a loving God allow that to happen? Is he just uninvolved? And some people even go so far as to say, does God even really exist? If God existed, why would this be here? Why would he allow this kind of suffering? Why would a God that's loving and involved allow Joseph to be imprisoned by his brothers, to be taken, to be then falsely accused? It doesn't make sense. Why does God not change this? And when it lands close to home, we really start to wonder, where's God in all of this? When it's not just a statistic that we read. And so, is God a loving God? Let's look at some verses. I have some verses on, is God loving? Is he involved? Let's go to Genesis 16:13. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. This is Hagar after Moses has sent, Abraham has sent her away because Sarah's jealous. Abraham sends Hagar away, and she's alone with Ishmael out in the wilderness, and she says, she gave this name to the Lord. It's the only place in Scripture God gets this name. Who spoke to her? You are the God who sees me, for I have now seen the one who sees me. God sees us. He is not unaware of what's going on. It's not when suffering happens that God is unaware, that he's not watching. He sees what's going on. Let's go to the next one. And I've got a whole bunch here. Luke 12:7. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. The hair on your head is numbered. God sees you. He recognizes when you're going through struggles and strife and suffering. Go to the next one, Diane. He's even aware when a sparrow falls to the ground. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father? Have you thought about that? When even a little bird falls to the ground, God's aware. That amazes me, the mind of God, that he's aware even of that. Even that bug that you killed, God was aware. God sees it all. He's aware. Now, is it that he doesn't care? Is he unmoved? All right, let's go to John 11:35. No, God is moved when there's suffering. Jesus wept. Go to the next one. There's 3 of these too. When he saw the crowds, this is Jesus, talking about Jesus, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. He saw them and he saw the chaos and he saw the sin and he saw the lost and he had compassion on them. God does care. And the next one, Diane, as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. He does care. So he's aware and he cares. So is he not able to intervene when there's suffering? Let's go to the next set, Diane. For he knows how we're formed. He remembers that we're dust. Okay, one more. That's still the compassion. I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? It's not that he can't. Go to one more. Luke 18:27. Jesus replied, what's impossible with men is possible with God. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he's unaware. It's not that he can't. So what is it? Why does God allow suffering? So all week I've been thinking about this. What if God, if there was a murder about to happen, why doesn't God just stop it right then before it happens? Why doesn't he intervene with the offender and like make the gun misfire or make the offender drop dead or do something so that murder doesn't occur? Why doesn't he do that? And why doesn't God, when there's a sexual offender, why doesn't he stop it before the offense happens? Why doesn't he say, no, it's not going to happen. You're not going to offend and eat it. Why doesn't he stop that? What if he were to stop that? We'd have to backtrack, you see, because sin doesn't occur when the offense occurs. Sin occurs when it first enters the mind. And so he would have to then stop the thought from occurring, correct? There's no thought of murder. There's no thought of sexual offense. And if that's the case, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? If God's not going to allow you to think that, where does free will stop? Where do we lose the free will in all of that? And you know, I don't want to hear that's God's will. I'd much rather hear your faith has healed you. Right? We all want to hear your faith has healed you. But the reality is that isn't always the case. That God sometimes chooses. And why does he do that? Because God wants us to choose him. He wants us to choose him. And back in the Garden of Eden, you see sin and suffering entered the world. And not only man was defiled by that and corrupted by that, but all of creation. And with that entered disease and death. And why didn't God stop it there? Why didn't he say, no, you're not? Why did he give them the trees to choose from in the first place? Because he didn't want us to be puppets in the hands of an angry God. He wanted us to love him and to see that his way was best without us having to follow his way. You know, in the classroom, you can make kids behave. You know, you can force them to behave. But isn't it a lot better when they choose to behave? You know, we got teachers in here, right? Isn't it a lot better when they choose to behave? And how do you get to that point? You show them that that's the better way. And then they choose that way. Will all of them choose that way, Bob? No, they don't all choose that way. But do we still have to give them that choice? Yes. And God still wants us to see that his plan is best, and I'm going to choose it. And when it doesn't make sense, I'm still going to choose it. And when it looks like this is chaos, and you're not listening, and you're not aware, and you're not moving in the power you can move in, I'm still going to choose it. Because you know what? God uses everything for his purpose. He even uses sin for his purpose. He doesn't cause sin. God doesn't cause sin, and God doesn't tempt us, but he allows it because he uses even the bad stuff for his purpose. One example? Glad you asked. God used murder and deceit and hatred to put Jesus on the cross. To pay the price for the very sin that put him there. And he used it for the cross. He used all the sin of Joseph's brothers to save Israel and to form a nation that would bring forth the Messiah. He used sin even in his plan. And we can look back over our lives and see the sin and be caught in that shame and guilt and blah, 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 and not be able to let it go because we can't forgive ourselves. But God even uses our sin. He even uses when we mess up to mold and to do things in our lives and in other lives. He's that big of a God. And he uses other people's offenses against us to do his purpose. I want to look at the end of Genesis chapter 50. He did it with Joseph. And Joseph at the end, starting with verse 22, he comes to the end of his life. This is recording the death of Joseph. And he comes to the end of his life. And he's looking back over all of his life. He's looking back over all the events of his life. And he is free and clear to enter into heaven. He has nothing holding him back. He has no offenses. He has no anything holding him back. He is totally free and clear. A free conscience before God. He hasn't taken offense to anything. And look what he says. Joseph stayed in Egypt, along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years, and he saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. I was trying to figure that out. So it'd be Ephraim's children would be his grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I think it's great-great. Is that right? 3 generations of Ephraim's children. So he saw 3 generations of Ephraim's children. His other son, Machir, the son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on his knees. Then verse 24, Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die. His brothers are still alive, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Now, Joseph's dad, Jacob, we're going to go back to Genesis 46. Yes, Genesis 46. Is it in there, Diane? Genesis 46, verses 2 through 4. There we go. When Jacob is deciding whether or not to go to Egypt, and this is a verse I don't think we got to this verse yet. Jacob is deciding whether or not to go to Egypt. When the boys come back, he's deciding whether or not to go. And this is what happens. God spoke to Israel, Jacob, in a vision that night. He has a vision, and the Lord says, Jacob, Jacob, here I am, he replied. Verse 3, I am God, the God of your father, he said. Don't be afraid to go to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. Verse 4. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely, bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. I'm going to send you to Egypt, but I'll bring you back here again. I will bring you back to the promised land. And so they took Jacob's bones back to the promised land when he died. They took his bones back. And when Joseph dies, he's ready to die. He says, take my bones back to the promised land. And we have that same promise. And I didn't put this one in there, Diane, because I just got it this morning. So hang on. I'm going to read it to you. 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 18. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command and the voice of the archangel with the trumpet call of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. And after that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. That same promise. When you die, it's not the end. Our bones will be raised too. I have a friend that walks, and she always walked at the cemetery, and she said, I'm going to know before anybody else when the Lord comes back. Because I'm going to see the dead rise. Well, I'll have to get Lee, because we need him. Okay.
God's in that.
That's what you need to do, Satan. Yeah. When we come to the end of our lives, I want to be able to look back over the course of my life and see God's hand in every single valley and every single mountain. And I want to see it woven into this beautiful tapestry of how God used me and how God uses you. I want to look back, and I don't want to be holding on to anything. I don't want to be holding on to anything. I want to know that I am free and clear to go to Him. I'm not holding offense against anybody, including myself. And I'm trusting God to weave it all together, to make this beautiful thing out of all the valleys and all the sin and all the offenses and all the things that have happened in my life into something beautiful. And that's what He does. That's what He does. And that's why He gives us choose him. And that's what he allows. What he allows here. Because there's coming a day when sin will be no more. And creation will be restored. There'll be no more suffering. There'll be no more death. There is coming a day. And we are going to be there. Those who love him. Those who chose him. Those who are called according to his purpose. And today we're going to celebrate communion. And Joseph actually is a lot like Jesus in a lot of ways, a type of Christ. And I thought about making this like a separate message, but I'm not going to today. There are over 100 ways that they are alike, Joseph and Jesus. Over 100 ways. I'm just going to tell you a few, because we're going to celebrate communion today. Both were beloved of their father. Both were envied and hated without a cause. Both of them foretold that one day they would rule. Both were rejected and condemned to die. Both were stripped of their clothing. Both were sold for silver into the hands of Gentiles. Both became a servant. Both were promised deliverance. They both promised deliverance to a condemned man. They both foretold the future accurately. They both were promoted to honor and glory and given a new name. All people were commanded to bow before both of them, or will be, with Jesus. They provided for all in need. Their people didn't recognize them. They allowed their brothers to suffer for a period of tribulation, and both will be revealed and reconciled. And there are many other ways. Those are just a few. Joseph and Jesus, a type of Christ, a pointing to Christ, a foreshadowing of the Messiah that was to come. And so today, we're those brothers. Really, the Lord has just given me this right now. We're the brothers coming before a king that we've offended, that should be holding it against us, and he doesn't. He doesn't hold our offenses against us. How can that be? How can he come? How can God give up his son for me in my sin? And yet he did. And so as we celebrate communion today, let's remember that salvation wasn't free. It cost God a lot. It cost him his son. And so, Bob and Susan, I haven't asked them ahead of time. Would you guys care to serve communion today? And so on that night, when Jesus was given over, he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And he took the cup, and after he blessed it, he said, "This is my blood, which was shed for the remission of your sin." We're going to come from the back, and I want to encourage you to come to the altar today and just meet with the Lord as you partake of communion.